This week on the Eldritch Lorecast.
I really can't wait to see like the Breaking Bad of actual play.
Dungeons of Drakkenheim is returning as a Daggerheart campaign.
Mighty Nein series is going to start pre-campaign, right? We're going to get a little bit of the backstory of these characters.
Another Unearthed Arcana has launched.
One of my favorite D&D books of all time is the Expanded Psionics Handbook of 3.5.
All that and more.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast, the most eldritch of podcasts when it comes to tabletop RPGs. My name is Ben Byrne, and this week, in a very special episode, I am joined by James Hake and Monty Martin and Kelly McLaughlin. The Dungeon Dudes themselves are here. Welcome, everybody, to the show.
Thank you.
And I have to ask, Monty, when it comes to, I've been thinking about this recently. I read an article from R.A. Salvatore the other day, about kind of writing Drizzt novels within the Forgotten Realms, especially around the kind of 3E, 3.5 into 4E era. And it's something with Grimhollow I've also been dealing with a little bit, is like, how do you write canon content in the lore for a piece of media that is intended by its very nature to be interactive to a point where it becomes immersive, but it's not overriding or overbearing on the players interacting with the world? What's your approach for Drakkenheim and the things that you work on?
When we wrote Drakkenheim as an adventure, adapting it from the live play, we were very clear from the start that the goal of that was to sort of start the written campaign adventure as if we were starting fresh for a new group of protagonists. And so we said the original heroes of Drakkenheim, Sebastian Crow and Veo Senya and Pluto Jackson, they can exist in the world as NPCs if the GM wants to utilize them as like rival adventurers, but they otherwise bow out and let the player characters be the protagonists of the story. And then the sort of the timeline begins right where the session zero was for the show. And we've kind of developed all of the written Drakkenheim content based on that sort of assumption, right? There's been a few cases where like it was a little bit indistinct, particularly in the Monsters book, but that's been our general approach, is that the game setting is sort of this neutral place that is separate from the show's canon. Although with the kind of wonderful thing is that the 7-year-long original Dungeons of Drakkenheim campaign, we recorded the final session yesterday. It won't be airing until the end of the month, but given the way the world has changed in our own actual play campaign, it is very tempting, to me at least, to be like, oh, maybe we do an official, like, this is how it all went down, and this is the world after, because there's a part of me that's, as we were not spoiling too much, but we have a very extended epilogue at the end of the show. Kind of my inspiration there is like the epilogues of the Fallout games, where I kind of narrated. So this was the way that it shook out. And even as in narrating that, I was like, oh, this is cool world building. And I really would love to, like, this is a whole campaign right here. This is the start of another thing. And so that's our take to it, though. Overall, I don't know how something that has multiple authors over decades gets managed. Sure. It honestly feels like a nightmare to me.
Yes, I can imagine that as well. I mean, even like speaking of world-changing events, folks have talked about how Pirates of the Ethereal Expanse, James, kind of changes its world setting through that adventure in some ways. And we get asked, like, if I'm playing in this setting, we're using the Ethereal Expanse setting guide, should I assume the events of Pirates of the Ethereal Expanse have happened or not? And the answer is, well, I don't know, your campaign, right? Or what do you think?
So I've had the good fortune to work on a number of campaign settings that have this sort of ongoing nature to them. Critical Role has done it, and they do it so that like the events of the games are canon, the live games are canon, and then every campaign setting they release, whether it's Tal'Dorei Reborn or Explorer's Guide to Wildmount or anything like that, those are sort of like fixed points along the overarching true canon of the show, and then you can sort of diverge your own canon off of that. I quite like that way of doing it. I think that's the way that like the Star Wars games do it as well. What era of Star Wars are you playing in? But
yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah. Sorry, finish your thought.
No, it's this thought is rambling and expansive. If you want to talk about the Critical Role portion of it, talk now.
Super Geek Mike's another YouTuber who we've collabed before, and he's a great dude. But we talked about doing a collab which never eventuated. But basically the idea was doing kind of like a Drakkenheim for the Briarwood arc of Critical Role, because that doesn't really exist like as an adventure module that you can play, right? Where you take Vox Machina out of it and you assume that maybe their character's in it, maybe Percy's an NPC somewhere, maybe he's still in the prison beneath Whitestone Castle. Please, Critical Role people, don't crucify me if I get any of these details wrong. But the idea is that the party come into it as their own characters that have their own connections to Whitestone and play through the campaign similarly to how Drakkenheim is written, extremely open, and you tell your own story in Drakkenheim. And it's just interesting to hear you verbalize, James, those two different approaches, that's not the approach that Critical Role have necessarily taken. And I'd never that hadn't crystallized in my brain for me before.
It's very interesting to me hearing from game masters that are running Dungeons of Drakkenheim that do make the choice to use our player characters as NPCs in their campaigns.
Sure.
It's often something that Kelly and I have mixed feelings about, because sometimes we have to hear the story of like, oh yeah, this is how my player characters brutally killed your player characters and things like that. And that always kind of makes us go, well, but in other times, like there were elements of Dungeons of the show that were not put in the books because they were really connected to the player characters' stories. And a lot of GMs, like there's one dungeon in particular that is kind of this mirror dimension of Sebastian's mother that is not in the book. And so many people love that dungeon. And they're like, why wasn't that in the book? And I was like, well, it was because it was all about one player character, that location. And we were like, there wasn't space in the book to adapt it and find another way for the players to go into it. There's a laundry list of locations now that like people still want us to write up because they watch the show and they want to take their players on those adventures too.
One way that another streaming group, the folks at Legends of Evantris, did it on their book, The Crooked Moon, which I had the good fortune to do a lot of development on, is to take the player characters in that campaign and make them evil, right? Sort of pump them full of corruption juice and make them into the villains, right?
A lot of people have made Sebastian Crow a villain in their campaign.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but they probably turned, kind of the same Sebastian Crow that you played into a villain. These villains are like, the corruption arc version of them, right? All these characters have gone through, horrible Ravenloftian transformations, turning into the worst possible version of themselves and creating sort of this alternate canon. I think when I started working with Evantris, I had not seen all of their show. So it's a little bit, I trust in their lore knowledge over mine of how those characters work out. But my understanding is it's sort of an alternate universe, an alternate bad ending for their player characters. Right. And then you kind of get the best of both worlds, where you get all of this stuff that you're familiar with, but it has been twisted such that your characters are the heroes. There's no possible way that the main campaign heroes are going to outshine you because they have turned into villains that you need to beat. And I think that's a really cool way of doing it.
In our book, what we ended up doing is, so when we played the campaign, there was a group of rival adventurers, and they kind of like got in our way a bit in the original campaign, where at first we would be going on quests, but then the quests that we weren't doing were being done by another party that would then like find the item and help out a faction that we were now against. And so we kept having this rivalry. And then in the end, we all became friends and we fought the ultimate evil together at the end of the first campaign. But we have in the book the option of using the rival adventuring party that we originally used in ours, or you can replace that rival adventuring party with Sebastian, Veo, and Pluto, and they can be sort of the rival adventurers. Mind you, you then have to take those characters and knock them down to being generic everyday heroes rather than, 20th level god killers. But that's kind of the caveat. And really, we wanted everybody to have a clean slate when they enter Drakkenheim. It's like, don't worry. Our story that we tell is one version of the story, but the history of Drakkenheim we have on paper. But what happens next from session 1, that's up to each individual group.
Well, speaking of Drakkenheim and what happens next.
Yeah.
What happens next is that Dungeons of Drakkenheim is returning, reimagined as a Daggerheart campaign. The Kickstarter pre-launch page has just gone live for this. I'm going to share a link in the chat. But Monty and Kelly, how are you feeling about this new project?
Daggerheart was very interesting to me when it launched. It seemed like a really cool game even from an outside perspective before I got my hands on the book. Just reading the concept of what Daggerheart was going to offer. My favorite part of D&D is sort of the role-playing, the character depth, the stories that you can tell about characters. That's always been my favorite part. Mechanics are like something that I use to help tell those stories, but Daggerheart seemed to be like, hey, we're putting the character narratives at the forefront, and we're designing a game that is meant to push those narratives as the driving force of the stories you're going to tell at the table. So already I was like, okay, sold. This sounds like my favorite version of tabletop gaming. So then I did get my hands on the book and I read through it. And yes, it was my favorite version of tabletop gaming. D&D is still going to be my favorite game forever because I love it. It's a part of me. It's ingrained in me. I know it very, very well. Daggerheart, though, is probably the second most interesting tabletop game that I have gotten my hands on in terms of what I like about tabletop gaming. So when the option presented itself for us to work with Darrington Press and Ghostfire Gaming to bring this into reality, it was a no-brainer, at least for my part, that like this was the system to really. Our original concept of Drakkenheim was to push forward character narratives. We have in our original D&D version of the book rules for creating personal quests for your characters, how a DM should use those personal quests and character backstories and backgrounds that we created to ingrain them into the story and push those narratives forward. So Daggerheart just felt like it was already doing a lot of the heavy lifting of the things that we were really pushing the envelope on in our book anyway. So I couldn't be more excited because it feels like we get to take a fresh look at something that we designed a while ago now and reimagine it in a way that feels like a shirt that was always always fit perfectly. And now we're trying it on and it's like, oh yeah, it looks good in this shirt,
Yeah. I think for myself, what got me really interested in the idea of converting the adventure to Daggerheart, very much echoing Kelly, was Drakkenheim was always built from the ground up that the players are driving the narrative forward. And that their choices and the consequences of their actions are what determine the ultimate fate of Drakkenheim. And one of the biggest successes of that I can say for the original campaign and for those who've played it with 5th edition is that no two Drakkenheim campaigns have the same ending. Like nowhere near it. They always diverge somewhere around the halfway point. And by the end, Drakkenheim campaigns start looking pretty like they're very unrecognizable from each other because the players' own stories and motivations really take it in different directions, which is what I wanted always from it. And that's why the original book very much has this kind of baton passing moment where we're like, So we don't know as authors how this is going to shake out. So use your judgment, GMs, and like work with your players. And that's one of those things where we wanted to make sure that we provided a lot of guidance. Whereas Daggerheart, it fits like a glove because Daggerheart's equipped to already do this. It's already bringing the players into the involvement of the narrative. It's already asking them to take that on from the beginning, and then combining that with some of the mechanics that are unique to Daggerheart, like specifically the hope and fear counting, as well as the stress mechanic. For me, I really like it when there is a tangible way of communicating to players the stakes as they're unfolding in the moment. And so I really like what fear is doing for a GM. I like the ways, and as we've been exploring the adventure itself, we've been really, I've loved, for example, the way that Daggerheart has the setup of making a stat block for an environment and giving a game master tools that they can use by spending fear to intrude and make that environment feel living and breathing, like it's responding to the players, is a really, really key piece of what we're trying to do, because it means that we can write environment stat blocks for locations in Drakkenheim that give the GM this really open-ended way of making the city feel like an adversary, which is always what it's meant to be. It's like you against Drakkenheim, you against the factions. Daggerheart having inbuilt mechanics like clocks as well really also helps in making sure that any GM that's running the system is always going to have these sort of tools to use. And then we get to do really fun things like reimagine contamination, which currently, if you don't know, in Daggerheart, player characters can accumulate up to 6 hope points, which they gain on most action rolls in the game, as long as their hope die comes up higher than their fear die when they roll the duality dice. And these hope points are used to bring in their experiences on future die rolls to help allies, but also to activate many of their domain powers, which are their character powers, and every class has a power that costs 3 hope to activate as well. Well, in Drakkenheim, when you get contaminated, you mark off one of your hope slots. So you go down from max 6 to 5 to 4 to 3. So you can still use hope, but the maximum amount that you can have is slowly decreasing until you turn into a monster. But to make up for that, and this has been the really cool innovation that we've been able to had the pleasure of working with the fantastic Michael Underwood, who's been helping us do the mechanical work of the conversion. Michael Underwood was one of the contributing authors to Daggerheart and a phenomenal designer in their own right, and brought us their ideas for mutations, and being like, okay, so yeah, we're going to take away their class powers eventually, but then we're going to give them really powerful mutations that then give the DM more things to do with stress and fear. So we're creating this really vicious cycle that is, I'm just so excited.
I'm so excited.
And that's where we're like in having these conversations where like hope dies in Drakkenheim. That's fear reigns. Like that's what this is all going to be about.
I know James wants to say something. I could talk about the mutations a whole bunch more, but I think we cracked something really, really cool. I'll let James speak in a second. I just wanted to echo the mutations thing because we just knew that if we make the mutations more robust and give you powers from them, as you accumulate contamination, you lose your class ability, but you gain a mutation ability. So, and you have to use fear and stress to bring that to life. And I think it's going to be so cool.
I'm echoing something that you guys have said already, but I love Mike Underwood.
Yeah.
Mike, from the experience I've had with them, one, they are one of the leading creative visions behind those environment stat blocks. And so to hear you guys say that you love them so much, I love them so much. They're one of my favorite parts of the Daggerheart system on a systemic level. And the one thing that I don't like about them is there aren't enough of them yet. And so if you guys are doing these bespoke environments for this, evil city, for this city that is actively fighting, that is actively a character that I think is a match made in heaven or eldritch hell, I guess.
And Mike is just so good at being evocative at the same time. So one of the things that they did with mutations is there's the mechanical effects, but then there's the prompt question to ask the player character. So one of our classic mutations in Drakkenheim is the belly maw. Like your stomach mutates and a giant fanged mouth that is hungry appears on your mouth. And Mike just wrote this prompt to give to the player of like, what does it feel like to be hungry all the time? Bringing these whole elements of giving also the GM these prompts that they can then bring to the player about what does it feel like to have like your body betray you as you succumb to eldritch contamination, I think is really going to add this really unique dimension to the whole feeling of the campaign in Daggerheart.
This is the thing that like, I think that Spencer and Rowan, of course, get all the flowers that they deserve for being at the forefront of Daggerheart. They are, they are the driving creative forces behind this brand new game. But Rob and Mike Underwood they're more behind the scenes. I think, and in some case, I think creatives do really well behind the scenes where they don't have to deal with the pressure of visibility. But I really want Mike to get their flowers because, from questions to class and domain design to adversary design to environment design, I could go to Mike. And given that they have enough free time to handle me pestering them with questions, I could get a masterclass on how to make Daggerheart sing. And in fact, I have on multiple occasions now. And I feel practically erudite, practically academic coming out of every sort of jam session I have with them.
Well, I want to just say, I don't know if you guys are aware of this story, but the reason why this all happened in the first place was, so obviously we were aware of Mike Underwood's design on Daggerheart, and that was already a great thing. We were like, okay, they've created some of our favorite parts of Daggerheart. Then we also learned that Mike Underwood had played through an entire Drakkenheim campaign. And then we found out that Mike Underwood had written a blog about why Daggerheart was perfect for Drakkenheim. So when it came time to figure out how we were going to do this conversion, meeting up with Mike and talking about that idea, Mike already knew everything that there was to know. They understood Drakkenheim, Daggerheart, and exactly how they wanted them to blend together. So it's been flawless.
And that was a very important part for Kelly and I, because we love Daggerheart, but it's a new thing for us. We don't have the same amount of experience with it because it's a new game. Like it's a new game. We haven't Kelly and I, between the two of us, have decades of D&D experience, but no one has that for Daggerheart yet, right? And I think one of the big things that people appreciate about Drakkenheim in its original form was how much thought was put into it originally, with blending the mechanics with the role playing, with having all those elements sing together. And so Kelly and I were really concerned that like if we were just doing this conversion ourselves, it was going to be like this paint by numbers, like we're just going to take out the parts here, replace them with Daggerheart isms and ship it. But we really didn't want to do that. And so I feel very fortunate that we've been able to bring someone in that is so talented and has such a finger on the pulse of just great RPG design in general, but also has all this experience with Daggerheart, because it kind of fills that gap that I just have to acknowledge that Callie and I have. Like we've only been able to play Daggerheart up to level 3, right? So our practical experience with the system, we haven't gone all 1 to 10 with it, and we've only had a handful of opportunities to actually play the game. And so being able to sort of, for lack of a better term, bring in some big guns. To really knock this out of the park, and I just feel so fortunate that it was so serendipitous. I think the way that it all worked out in all this coming together, and also having Darrington Press's involvement in the whole project as well, and the Ghostfire team coming back around for another round with us. It's a real privilege, and we're just so excited to get to do this again.
So this is a triple partnership. You're publishing with Ghostfire, and what, if you can talk about it, what's your involvement with Darrington on this? Because it's not an SRD project.
That is correct. So because Darrington has a direct hand in this project, it does give us a higher level of support that is something that we really like. To have that direct collaboration and as well, I think it's going to allow us because recognizing, of course, that like Daggerheart's still early in its genealogy, and like we haven't seen what does a full level 1 to 10 Daggerheart published module look like yet. And so
soon we will. But this allows us to kind of have a little bit more of a behind the curtain look at what the thought process is internally within Daggerheart, and I think that's going to be a really important element in us making this as successful a conversion as it possibly can be.
It is a perfect time if you're a D&D player or a Drakkenheim fan who wants to try Daggerheart. Here's an adventure module to help you dive straight into it. If you're a Daggerheart fan, here's a setting that you might not have gotten to experience yet that has a really strong theme, and I will say, a kick-ass adventure. I do love Drakkenheim, just for all the things you were talking about before, Monty and Kelly, in terms of like its openness, its sandboxiness. It is great to run with the players kind of, driving the narrative forward. So the Kickstarter page pre-launch is live. We are launching the Kickstarter in November, but if you go and follow the page, and I only just discovered this morning for myself, there are like stretch goals associated with how many followers the page gets, which are miniatures of some of the canon characters from Drakkenheim. If we have 1,500 followers on the Kickstarter page before launch, it's Pluto Jackson, 3,000 is Veo, and 4,500 is Sebastian Crow themselves. So those will be added to every pledge. If it's a digital pledge, it'll be an STL. If it's a physical pledge, it'll be a physical miniature. So go follow the Kickstarter page because it is going to be amazing.
And I really want to see Sebastian Crow come to life. So like, let's hit it. Let's hit it.
They're fantastic. Like I'm seeing them for the first time today, and I'm just like, wow, those are sick. Like I would love to have those, even just as like NPCs. You know. Speaking of beautiful things and Critical Role, going into the news this week. The Mighty Nein animated series on Amazon has a launch date. It is on November 19th. So it is only a short ways away. I believe it was Travis and Sam gave an interview recently where they talked about kind of a tone change for the show from the Legends of Vox Machina being a bit more of a gritty action drama, whereas Legends of Vox Machina was more of like a comedy. We've talked on the Lorecast about the tonal shifts, the breakneck tonal shifts in the Legends of Vox Machina, so we'll see what happens with the Mighty Nein. And also that episodes will be longer, so episodes will have an average runtime over 40 minutes instead of the more typical sort of half hour. James, go ahead.
No, I'm just really excited. This is not new news, but the Mighty Nein series is going to start pre-campaign, right? We're going to get a little bit of the backstory of these characters before they met in, some Critical Role fan I am. I can't remember the name of the town the Mighty Nein met in.
Crucify him.
I know, put me up. But in that inn, before all their adventures with the circus and meeting Molly and Yasha and the Devil Toad and all of that good stuff happened before Jester slammed all the windows of thaumaturgy. Those are my bona fides, people. I might not remember the name of the town, but I can tell you everything that happened in it. But the Mighty Nein meeting is a great moment, but those characters have such a rich backstory that actually being able to see it put to screen is way more exciting to me as a fan of the Critical Role live show than just simply seeing it adapted to an animated screen. That's really cool. Like Ford and Jester meeting for the first times and talked up real high. And I think that's very exciting, especially now knowing through the end that, spoiler alert for Critical Role Campaign 2, they get together at the end, right? That lets them, that knowledge, right, gives you the ability to chart a full romantic arc and start with a little meet cute in the very beginning and then have some will they, won't they, and then finally bring it all together. So I think this is great. There's some great storytellers at Critical Role and at Titmouse and all that stuff. And given the opportunity with Vox Machina as kind of a proof of concept, I think they can really go for broke here.
What a time to be alive where D&D gets fully animated shows in like high production and wide release.
And in such quantity that we can be picky about it, right?
Yeah. Monty and I, not to make this more about Drakkenheim, but obviously with the excitement, we've speculated what a Drakkenheim show would look like. And we actually had that very conversation of, should we start a little bit before and tell the stories of how the characters arrive? And like, it's an interesting idea that like when you move to a new medium, and I think this is what Critical Role is discovering with this season is that you get to ask questions about, well, what does this medium offer that we didn't have access to before, and how can we use that medium to amplify the storytelling? And I think that like, telling a bit more of the backstory and digging into the characters a little bit deeper is a very smart way to use the medium to amplify storytelling.
You're gonna be triggering all of my PhD researching classes because I wrote so much on remediation and transmedia and transmedia storytelling and adaptations, right? Because as it's so interesting as you move from one medium to another, right? The different layers of what becomes important for the storytelling beats and what doesn't. I'm not even going to get started. I'm not going to start.
Well, you're making me want to talk about theatrical dramaturgy, right? Because it's the same discipline in a different field.
That's his PhD.
We're going to go off.
The whole essence of it is like the stage to screen conversation.
Yeah.
Right? Is like what happens when you go from live theater to cinema. Because, my only sidetrack of that is that my favorite conversation about this is that when movie cameras were first built, the earliest films mimic the language of their prior media, which was theater. So you would get this single camera that was in a fixed place that was kind of mimicking the point of view of an audience member seated in an audience. And it wasn't for decades until cinema actually found its language, found the grammar of editing, the shot, the cut, of montage, all of these things that we now take for granted as part of cinematic storytelling. It had to walk before it had to run. And so that's one of the things that I often think about in terms of even actual play, of like, actual play and using role-playing games, like role-playing games as a medium, have a couple decades under their belt and have found like their grammar, but the actual play itself is its own medium, and I think is still discovering its own grammar, so to speak. That's my sidetrack on all this.
I agree with you completely, because we've watched how, just using Critical Role as the example, but there are many actual plays that have tried different formats and different styles, even in the years that Critical Role was sort of first coming up. I haven't watched episode 1 of campaign 4. I think it released earlier this week. So I didn't put it on the run sheet explicitly, but just from seeing the way they're advertising it, the kind of high drama that they're putting behind the cinematics and things around it, you definitely feel the medium evolving to try to evoke a more, dare I say, cinematic kind of vibe to it, rather than just like nerdy ass voice actors playing D&D. You know what I mean?
And like, well, actual play has been able to do some very dramatic things in terms of its storytelling. By and large, actual play, I would say, tilts towards comedy. And I asked this question. I've been asking this question more recently. It's like, I really can't wait to see like the Breaking Bad of actual play. Like, I do. I want to see an actual play that is not funny. That is just zero. Like obviously Breaking Bad had comedic elements to it. There were jokes in the show, but it was not a comedic show, and that was not the intent of it. And so like, I want to see a show that is just like gripping in terms of its like character driven drama and sort of the storytelling itself that isn't necessarily existing for comedy. I think Critical Role, like, they kind of run this interesting, like, I think the tone shift that you bring up is an interesting thing of like, where does it want to live? Because I think that as voice actors, the cast of Critical Role is really talented at delivering on both comedy as well as drama and delivering on more serious roles. Whereas when you compare, say, to a more stand-up oriented or a comedy background cast, it's a different sort of tool. And that's where you can see like the cast itself bringing their own training as performers to the mix. But yeah, I'd be very curious to see that evolve.
I think the Breaking Bad of actual play already exists, and it's called Exandria Unlimited Calamity.
Oh, yeah? You think so?
Yeah. Brennan's Exandria Unlimited series, especially Calamity and Divergence, parts 1 and 3, are, to me, they're the pinnacle of actual play. And it's why I'm so excited to see Brennan in the DM seat for a really long form campaign 4, right? Because those EXUs, like 4 or 5 episodes a piece, and they're great, but they're not an epic in the way that a Breaking Bad might be. But if we're able to maintain that tone of serious character drama that persists throughout both Calamity and Divergence, and do that on a scale of years of storytelling, we're in for a real treat with C4.
Yeah. Someone in chat said, I don't think that's possible with TTRPGs. And I'm like, so you have never played 10 Candles.
So I was about to share that one of the richest experiences that I've had in TTRPGs was we were at a con, and a buddy of ours, Austin Hartel, wanted to run 10 Candles for us. And he got this like ragtag group of players together. And I was like, oh, here we go. Another night of comedy and debauchery. And we all went into this like pitch black room. We lit the candles. We all created our characters. We did our little voice recordings, and everybody went 110% into, like, there was not a joke.
No, it was the most. It was the most serious.
But it was such a rich experience that, like, everybody was devastated as we neared the end. My character had this whole like moment of like, when they played my recordings, my character's main thing was like he was a coward. So at a certain point, I flipped the coward card and I ran away and died alone in the woods. And then they played my recording.
Which sounds funny when you tell the story now, but it was not funny.
It was not funny. And then they played the recording, and in the recording, it's me whimpering, being like, I just don't want to die alone. And I was just sitting there like, how is this happen? Like, it was brutal. And everybody had these like horrible moments of like it was not horrible, but like just there was a lot of drama. There was a lot of intensity. And we came out of that room being like, well, that was one of the greatest TTRPG experiences that I've ever had, especially at a convention with just this random group of people thrown together. And still to this day, I see those people at cons and I'm like, you were in the 10 Candles room. We're friends. We went through some stuff together. And so you can have those experiences. Is actually why that Monty and I we still do this, but we try to stop using the word fun as much. Like, you need to have fun at the table. Cool. We actually have tried to swap that out for you need to have a rewarding experience. The goal is to have a rewarding experience because it's not always about fun. Sometimes it's about digging into other emotions.
Yeah. I had a very similar experience, maybe not quite as intense as that, but the first time I played Spencer Stark's previous game, Alice is Missing, the game that he made before Candela Obscura, which was before Daggerheart. And it's pretty famously a tabletop game where you don't talk using your voice at all to anyone. I played it not asynchronously, but away in space, atemporally from other people, just using text messages, because the goal of that game, the point of that game, the conceit of that game is you are high school friends texting each other while you look for a friend of yours who has gone missing. Suddenly, Alice is missing. One of the things that you do before that game, and this is what reminded me of it, is that you make a recording of yourself to be played at the very end of the game once you've done all that. And everyone's recording, after we went through this, to go through like this long extended period of just texting one another, to hear each other's voices speak in such a, we didn't know what we were going to get into. And our characters had changed dramatically over the hour and a half that we had played hunting for our lost friend in mortal peril. To then hear our sort of like, we were worried, but we were still happy. We were still unchanged and innocent at the end of all of that was staggering, shocking.
Yeah.
Spencer Stark guy. I guess he knows how to build a game or something like that.
Well, speaking of intense drama and dramatic storytelling, if you want to experience intense drama and dramatic storytelling at PAX Aus, Ghostfire Gaming will be there. We have a booth where we are running D&D 5th edition, and we are also running our board game Aberration, which is set within Grimhollow. We have sessions across all 3 days of the convention. I am running the Grimhollow myself. The only session I'm not running is the Sunday morning because I will be away recording a Lorecast at that point. But if you are going to PAX Aus and you want to come and play some D&D with us at the Ghostfire Gaming booth, I have just shared a link. It'll be down in the doobly-doo if you're watching this on YouTube or Spotify. But otherwise, Twitch chat, you can sign up and we will be there all weekend. Even if you just want to drop by and say hello, please do, because that is one of the joys of going to a convention. Dale will also be at PAX Aus. Dale is doing a ton of panels. I don't know what they all are. I do know that she is doing a Draw Steel actual play on the Saturday at 1 p.m. Cool. With Adam Carnivale, who's on the Lorecast frequently, as well as Pats and Roman will also be involved, who are friends of the show. And she is also doing Becoming the Best Game Master You Can Be on the Sunday at 2:30. I believe she's doing that with Chaosium. And I think there's at least 2 other panels that she's doing, but I'm not her secretary. So, go check out the PAX Aus site if you want to see where Dale will be. Sean, the weekend after, because we won't be announcing this next week, is going to be at Gamehole Con, where we are running the Grim Hunt, our Grim Hollow organized play. I checked the Gamehole Con website. All sessions of that appear to be booked out currently, but go check it out. Get on a wait list if you want to try play in the Grim Hollow organized play at Gamehole Con. And Sean is also doing a panel with Joe Raso, Ghostfire Gaming's producer, called The Life of an RPG Project, which I did not put the time down here on. My apologies. But go check out the Gamehole Con website to find out where that is. I think it's on the Saturday.
Nailed it.
I'm so good at this. I should do this every week. Speaking of doing things every week, I like to play video games. I do that most weeks, unless I'm painting miniatures. But video games is also a hobby of mine. Unfortunately, Starbreeze, a video game developer, has cancelled their cooperative D&D video game project, which had been described as a live service multiplayer game, and Starbreeze have unfortunately laid off 44 of their employees, which is unfortunate. The company shifting focus back to their flagship live service game, Payday 3, cited as the reason. They just feel like that's a safer bet for them. So that's disappointing. On the good news side, I suppose, Wizards of the Coast is opening a new video game studio in Montreal called Wizards of the Coast Studios Incorporated. Expected to support up to 200 jobs and will be located in Montreal and focus on D&D content. Ian World, and I kind of agree with this, said the obvious speculation is potentially Baldur's Gate 4. Maybe, who knows? We'll see. But this studio is an addition to Invoke Studios that are already in Montreal, or is it Gameloft in Montreal? One of them are in Montreal. Giant Skull Studios, who are also doing the action-adventure video game that we've talked about, that's set in D&D worlds somewhere. There's so many D&D video games now, actually. I'm struggling to juggle them in my mind. Yay for this.
I mean, let's go to Montreal, Kelly.
I mean, there's a lot of gaming studios in Montreal, and it's not far.
Yeah.
I mean, comparatively to everywhere else in the world.
I mean, I've done that drive. a couple times.
It's not like walkable to Montreal, but we can get there.
Yeah. Hang out for those D&D video games coming to a place near you. And speaking of games, a little bit of extra news here. Kickstarter, the Kickstarter Union, Kickstarter United, have decided to go on strike as of October 2nd. The strike has been triggered by negotiations around 2 particular issues that Kickstarter United are having with management. Negotiations are ongoing. Both parties seem to be willing to negotiate kind of currently. But what the union are asking for is an $85,000 annual minimum salary. And they also want Kickstarter to stick to a 4-day work week, which they've been on for the past 3 years. Kickstarter saying that they would prefer to be able to keep the option within their contracts to temporarily or permanently move back to a 5-day work week. So that is going on over there at the moment. Notably, the union is not asking for a boycott or people to not support creators that are doing things through Kickstarter during the strike. Both sides reading some articles on this, I believe on ICV2 and Board Game Wire. Both parties, talk a lot about community, the importance of giving creatives the opportunity to make things through Kickstarter. So hopefully they come to agreements soon, but just worth knowing about for folks. And then finally, speaking of things worth knowing about, another Unearthed Arcana has launched. It feels like one of these is launching every other week. Monty and Kelly, did you do the homework this week? Have you read, and it's okay if you haven't, the Unearthed Arcana Psion?
The clip of these is really fast now. Like there's a lot.
I'm so busy.
I know it's been so busy. I mean,
I heard they dropped it. Have I read it? No. I've been reading Daggerheart. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's. We were talking it feels like it was literally 2 weeks ago. We were talking about they'd released one about the arcane subclasses again, where they had the arcane archer. Mm-hmm. They had a bunch of wizard subclasses. I had skimmed it at best. The other three, James, had not done their homework, but I barely did my homework this week as well. So
I got to admit that, so Monty and I, we were actually talking about this the other day, because the fact that there's two of us, our production schedule involves we take weekends off for, work-life balance. Mm-hmm. And then we come in and the two of us need to be together, and then we need to work on the script. We need to and so whenever, we're good friends with Colby from D4 D&D Deep Dive. And he films, it's just him. And so every time that one of these Unearthed Arcana drops, Colby's like, I'm making a video right now. What are you guys doing? Do you want in? And we're like, I'm having dinner. I don't know, man. And it's like, by the time we get around to it, it's like the ship sailed, and we can't actually, we always feel like we're a little bit behind on producing content on the Unearthed Arcana, because everybody else has made a video about it. And it's like, what are we going to say that the other 5 of our friends who already put out videos haven't said? It's not like we're going to do a deeper dive than D4 Deep Dive. So usually we're just like, if we can get on the call with Colby and riff about it, cool. But otherwise it feels like it's happening so fast that Monty and I don't have the ability to produce the content fast enough to stay on top of it. And it's kind of unfortunate, but I'm behind on even keeping up on them or reading them. I do, but I don't feel like I have enough to say at my first glance, and I need to read it thoroughly to actually produce a full opinion. So it's tough. Well, it's exciting, but it's tough.
Never fear, Dungeon Dudes, because I did do the homework this week. Yay! And I can talk extemporaneously about it, because let me tell you, one of my favorite D&D books of all time is the Expanded Psionics Handbook of 3.5. My 3.5 games, whenever I ran them, kind of in the latter days of 3rd edition, were I banned the player's handbook, and I've only permitted classes from Expanded Psionics or Book of Nine Swords. Because those
are two
classes,
of Monty's favorite books.
I love the Book of Nine Swords.
They're the best books of 3rd edition D&D.
I was just saying, if I had mine in Breach.
Wise minds say those are the best D&D books produced in that era. And they laid the groundwork for the class structure of 4th edition, which is now being sort of getting critically reevaluated by the folks behind, say, Draw Steel and Daggerheart and their fans. So this Psion is rather like the Psion of 3rd edition, and I say largely to its benefit. It's a full class, which I think is already an improvement over more recent attempts to kind of Psion up other classes through subclasses. I think D&D 5e's urge to primarily make subclasses and every once in a blue moon make an addition to the core 12 is a good instinct. But they have in the past, I think, been a little bit too hesitant to create new classes like the Psion.
I think I share that belief that I wanted to see a couple more classes added to the game over the course of the 2014 rules lifespan. I think only having the Artificer as the only new addition felt very, very thin. And I think that new classes really get people excited in a way that I think, subclasses are always lovely because they can always transform the base class. But I think that new classes themselves are a lot of fun, and I hope that I know that the Psion, thinking back to the Mystic, which we never saw, the Psion's always a hard one because I think that the concept of psychic powers in general and like psychic power. Like I'll always remember, like, are you going to use the psionics that are different rules in your campaign where like dispel magic and counterspell don't work against psionic powers because it's a different thing. It's a different power source. Right. But I love the weirdness of psionics. It is a very more like eldritchy horror sort of take on magic in general, which I quite like. And I don't know. I'm glad to see the Psion back.
I want to talk about a couple of things in particular with regards to the Psion that were pain points for me in 3rd edition, and I think have been replicated here. The first of which is, and this is the flip side of this class issue I was just talking about, is why does a Psion need to exist as a class? That's a question. And I think this is exactly why Wizards has not done that until this point, is what is the distinction that the Psion has from the Wizard? They're very similar. They have a D6 hit die. They are an intelligence caster. They have 9th level spell casting. They get cantrips and rituals. And in many ways, they look a lot like a wizard. One of the ways that 3rd edition did it was by making a lot of Psion specific spells. And one thing I have to note about this Unearthed Arcana is there are not a lot of psionic specific spells. There's like 5 or 6, I think, going through right now. Intellect Fortress, Summon Astral Entity, Telekinetic Crush, Raulothium's Psychic Lance.
Do you have to pronounce it that way?
Yes. Yes, if you don't, the Pinkertons will come to you. Psychic Scream. Oh yeah, so that's 5 unique psionic spells. And you know what? I don't think that's enough. I think they need more.
I just in general feel with 5th edition broadly that classes don't have enough. I am the only class that gets the spells. I feel like the list of spells that are available to only one class and one class only is vanishingly short. Like, it's more than a dozen because the smite spells, I feel like paladins and rangers have a bigger pool of unique spells, and deservedly
artificers too.
Deservedly so. But I really do like personally feel that it should be in the ballpark of like at least 4 per spell level that are totally unique to a given class. Because there you do run into like the spells as class features thing and things like that. But I don't know. I feel like more unique spells for a class help them shine with their identity in a very palpable way. Obviously, there's pitfalls to that approach, but I don't know. I think, again, not to compare to Daggerheart, but like the domains are very unique. Right. And their powers are very unique. And yes, more than one class always accesses a given domain, but it really adds a lot of distinction to each class.
Well, I think that the thing about 5e and the way they've tried to build it, particularly towards the end of 2014, before the 2024 refresh, is there were a lot of subclasses, particularly in Tasha's, I want to say, that like introduced how to play a rogue but as a bard, or how to play a fighter but as a wizard, or like whatever, those are bad examples and I'm just making them up. But there was, maybe a better example is like the Warlock Celestial Pact, which makes a lot of sense narratively. Yeah, you make a pact with a seraph or an angel or something, but it just kind of felt like it was a a cleric by another route, and I feel like 5e has a lot of that, but by design, kind of, to be ultimately flexible to cater to as many different fantasies and character types as possible. And I think that broadly, like, I don't entirely agree that we need more classes for 5e, because I think that a couple of times, or I think when you're introducing a new class as opposed to a subclass, you need to be in a space where you can't build that class using an already existing class and subclass build. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I feel like the Apothecary from Drakkenheim, the Monster Hunter from Grimhollow, which is on D&D Beyond, go get it now. The Talent, perhaps, MCDM's class, they kind of fill a niche that isn't currently represented in the kind of 12 core one. Same with the Artificer. It kind of provides something new. But there's been a couple times where I've been like, oh, this would be a cool class idea. Oh, I can make that. I can make that if I just take a cleric and I take this, feat, and that basically makes that class.
That's actually been a huge challenge. It's like after the Apothecary, I was like, ooh, what other classes could I make? And it's actually tough to think of something in a fantasy world that isn't already covered by one of the existing classes. I like the idea of more classes. The psionics and all of that is actually a cool place to build something that now feels separate from the rest of the spellcasters, hopefully. But it is actually tough sometimes to be like, oh, well, maybe we have a shield warrior. And I'm like, well, no, that's just a fighter with a shield. And so
exactly that.
Oh, well, what if we have a fire mage? I'm like, well, you can turn any mage into a fire mage. Like, you don't need a class that's fire mage. And so you have to start thinking outside the box and trying to find these weird pockets. Like for us with the Apothecary, it was like, well, we don't have science.
Yeah.
What if we make weird science as a class? Like make it Eldritch horror science fiction, classic science fiction, Frankenstein, Dr. Hyde, and that's where we went. So, but it's tough to find those pockets.
Yeah.
You need both a mechanical distinction and a story distinction, right? Like your Monster Hunter class, Ben, really lands that story distinction, and it works really hard to divest itself from its similarities to other monster hunters that already exist in D&D. And that to me is what really sings about that class.
Yeah. Well, we built the Monster Hunter, and I've talked about this before, but it predates me working at Ghostfire Gaming because everybody knows I'm a huge fan of The Witcher. And I wanted to build not just a Witcher, but like an intelligence-based Monster Hunter, and no class really get like a Paladin. No, it's more faith-based. It's not really based on intelligence and knowing the monsters. The Ranger, yes, but it's very like nature-driven and tied with magic. And so I looked at many other options of what I wanted to play in my home game before I was like, no, it feels like there is a gap here that can be filled. Mm-hmm. And I feel like you really need to drill down and find that place before justifying really building a new class for 5th edition. And I'm talking 5th edition explicitly here.
I'll say I have a higher level of tolerance for new classes in the respect that I don't like to come back to an earlier book that was brought out. The Book of Nine Swords fundamentally was just Fighter 2.0, Monk / Rogue, like the 3 classes it introduced. The Sword Sage, the Crusader, and the Warblade. The Warblade was basically just the fighter redesign. Mm-hmm. The Sword Sage was just a weird monk rogue hybrid, and the Crusader was just the Paladin redesign. So I have a tolerance for, we're going to take a concept but explore it in a radically different mechanical angle, right? Yeah. So I would have, if you wanted to do like a fire mage class, but you want to show me a completely new set of mechanical bases for that, I'm here for it. Like we can entertain on that. And that's where I do feel that we have enough like cultural lore that establishes that magic and psychic powers are 2 different things, but they're also not.
This is what I want to seize upon here, because the Scion has a lot of work to do to make its recycling of core spells, which are, again, really versatile, and turn them into something thematically distinct. And I think its subclasses and its disciplines try and get on it. I know we're kind of coming up on time, but we got to talk about the subclasses before we kind of put an end to this conversation. They are the Metamorph, which allows you to psychically sculpt flesh and life, turning your psionic powers inward, which I think is really cool. It includes something, an organic weapon called a Viscera Launcher, and I think that's metal as hell. We've got the Psi Warper, which warps space with the power of your mind. I think that's the classic telekineticist and, transporter, that sort of thing, teleportation. There's the Psi Kinetic, which is all about energy and force fields. And there's the telepath, which I think is probably our strongest cultural perception of what a psionicist is. And so my question is, do these 4 subclasses fall in line with what you think of as a psionic user from comic books or movies or other media?
I mean, just hearing you describe those, I'm like, this isn't a direct comparison, but I was like, we could play like a weird version of the Fantastic Four. They're not quite the same, but like it feels very like Marvel X-Men powers, which does feel psionic. I feel like psionics should be, I don't know, the way you described all of those, I was like, okay, I'm sold on each of those. Like those are cool ideas.
I'm just going to throw out that there's a little part of me that's like the magic and psionics thing. Maybe people should look a little bit more at how Warhammer 40K handles that distinction as well.
Yeah, right.
Which would be a cool angle to think about how magic and psionics blur.
Correct me if I'm wrong, because you bringing up Warhammer 40K, and I'd like to think I have a pretty good handle on the Warhammer 40K universe, but maybe I'm about to learn something new here. Because my understanding, like psychic power, the Eldari, they dip their minds into the warp, and that's kind of how they're able to create, magical effects. Space Marine librarians are fundamentally doing the same thing. The Space Wolves, a chapter of, sorry, everybody, we just dipped into 40K lore. We just lost half the listeners. The Space Wolves hate psychers, but they don't have psychers.
No, the Space Wolves have psychers.
Rune priests.
Yeah.
But they call them rune priests, right? But this is what I'm getting at is it's all sort of fundamentally the same thing, but there are different belief systems around them and slightly different ways of using. So it's not that like some people use magic and some people use psychic power. They're all kind of using the same thing in different ways, but they also have their own belief systems around them that kind of influence what they believe is happening.
Yes,
is that your understanding as well?
There is a lot of like, I think that for me, it comes down to like, the language is the interesting piece there. Cause like you have like the chaos sorcerers, right? That exist in the 40K world or like others that would call themselves witches within that setting as well. Right. Or are called witches and whatnot. And yes, it is all still coming from the same power source, which is the realm of chaos, which itself though, like the realm of chaos itself is this fundamental blurring of the lines of, is it psychic energy? Is it a realm of magic? And I think that like Games Workshop wholly embraces that because they have like, when you go to Age of Sigmar or their fantasy side, then it is magic. But then on the science fiction side, it is psychic powers. And I do think that is always one of the things that Scion has always wrestled with in D&D as well. I agree. Is that I think that if we were to say by and large, magic powers are the domain of fantasy and psychic powers are the domain of science fiction. Are there counterexamples? Are there tons of things that blur the line? And absolutely. But if you just look at the general trend line of it, and so I do think that like, a campaign where your player characters are a apothecary, a scion, and an artificer is a very different campaign than a wizard, a paladin, and a bard. Yeah. Right? Like it will just fundamentally feel different.
I mean, I liked, James, what you said earlier about your approach to a campaign where you're like, player's handbook is out, and what is in is the Book of Nine Swords and this Scion class. And as 5e has a lot of content in it, and third parties adding stuff onto D&D Beyond, I think it's really interesting for GMs and with players to agree is like, you don't have to include everything in your campaign. Not every class needs to be accessible. Yeah. What is the story of your world and who exists here? And let's pick classes and character archetypes from that pool so that it kind of creates an immersive feeling world rather than a kitchen sink fantasy setting, which is fundamentally the Forgotten Realms, right? And that's where like psionics does start to break down for me, where it's like, oh, we're putting this in here too. You got sci-fi in my fantasy. Like, can we?
I, for one, love a bit of sci-fi in my fantasy, but that's sure. Just me.
Yeah. Well, speaking of sci-fi in your fantasy, this podcast is talking about fantasy, but recorded with technology because we're living in the modern world.
He brought it home, people. He brought it home. But
it's coming to an end.
Wow. That was the
segue. Monty, Kelly, let the folks know what's going on. What's new with you at the moment? Where do you want folks to go if they want to follow up and check you out?
We got 3 big things that are coming down the pipeline for us that we just want to make sure everyone is aware of. First of all, you can find all of our stuff on the Dungeon Dudes YouTube channel. So just Dungeon Dudes YouTube, you're going to find it right away. DungeonDudes.com will point you everywhere. But first of all, we're coming up on the grand finale of the original Drakkenheim campaign. That's going to be airing at the end of this month on October 28th. So come watch that. It's been a 7-year-long campaign coming to a close. We're very excited. And we're going to have a new campaign that we're going to be starting with the same players in 2024 next spring. But we have also a new project that is going to be airing on the channel starting October 31st with Deborah Ann Wool as our GM. Kelly and I got to play with Deb and some really fantastic other celebrity players, which was amazing.
It's a wild.
It is a wild.
It's a wild
combination of actual play, D&D, escape rooms, reality TV. It's called Tales from Wood Creek. The trailer is also on our channel. It's going to be a wild ride. Of course, we've got, as we talked about at the top, Drakkenheart, which is our beloved code name for it, or Dungeons of Drakkenheim, the Daggerheart campaign guide, which will be coming to Kickstarter on November 4th. So I'll make sure to find all those good links. So that's all the wild and crazy cool stuff that's coming up for us. It's like dude season right now. Like we got everything happening. We're firing on all cylinders. I don't know when I get to sleep.
No sleep for us.
Well, as Dude season continues, you can catch the Eldritch Lorecast again live next week, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 4 p.m. Pacific. We'll be streaming to Twitch. It will be 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time going forward. If you're on YouTube, Spotify, any other place, likes, thumbs, stars, stuff helps get us out to more listeners. I've been Ben Byrne here with James Hake, Monty Martin, Kelly McLaughlin, and we will be back next week with another episode of the Eldritch Lorecast. I forgot to say the email address. podcast@ghostfiregaming.com. There we go. Don't just leave that in.
Rock on.
Dante's got to come and tell
us
we're off the air.
Yeah, come on.
We won't say it until he does.
There he is.
There he is.